Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Folks, super excited. We've got a great show today, a unique show. I've got two sheroes on the show today who I look up to very much. They're on my team. I can't get anything done in the world without them. Monica Niro, Chief Operating Officer, and Jumana El-Ammori, our Chief Marketing Officer. Guys, thanks for being on the show today.
Thanks for having us.
Of course. Our show today, guys, super excited to share. It's on Ramadan. We're going to talk Ramadan, and we're going to share all the tips, all the tricks, and how we do things. Because we want to help you. We want to help you get out there and make your Ramadan super successful. So let's start off with some stats. American Muslims donate $4.3 billion a year. Big number, massive number. And that's a study led by our good professor, Dr. Shadiq Siddiqui. And we also know that American Muslims donate nearly 2 billion, 1.8 or so in Zakat. And what we also know is the majority of that happens in Ramadan. Isn't that crazy? Almost $2 billion goes out, if not more, in just 30 days. An insane amount of money. When I share that to my colleagues at organizations working outside the Muslim nonprofit sector, they're just blown away by how much money that is in one spot, one time. I mean, tell me, when you think about that number and when you think about that Ramadan number, like, Mon, like what happens in your mind?
What happens in my mind is, how do you get ahead of preparing and ensuring that, your organization is lined up to take part in that big part of giving?
Yeah. And Jumana, what do you think? I mean, you're coming out of, mashallah, 15 years in growing a nonprofit, from 1 million to over 15 million. You've gone through at least 15 Ramadans. Tell me, like, what's Ramadan? What comes to your mind when you think about Ramadan and you think about, that number, almost $2 to $4 billion?
What comes to me is an opportunity to showcase campaigns that are really the highlight of any charity. This is the time where Muslims are paying attention to where they want to put their dollars. And when there's $2 to $4 million on the table, it's an opportunity for every charity to showcase their best work. Not only to support, the ummah in entirety, but to really push Muslims to give to missions that matter. Yeah.
Mon, do you remember? I remember the first Ramadan campaign you and I worked on. I think it was 2020. And I remember that year in 2020, we had just started the nonprofit division at Intuitive Solutions. Actually, not true. The year before that, Bilal had started it, and he had donor calling teams while you and I were at ISNA. And then in 2020 is when we formalized the nonprofit growth division at Intuitive Solutions. 5 years. Mon, thank you for being with me. And thank you for being at Intuitive for all 5 years. Grateful to have you there. What was some of those first, your favorite moment in that first Ramadan that comes to your mind that you can remember?
Well, to kind of take a step back, my favorite part was really learning about the culture and what does take place during that spiritual time of year. That was very new to me. And every year I keep learning about those elements. I'm very faith inspired, so learning new religions and the faith behind it all really it's a deep passion for myself. Apart that, it was just, very interesting to see where there was a lot of planning, playbooking, and, 2 to 3 months before Ramadan takes place, the difference of the Ramadan execution. So we had, our mission partners that were with us earlier on, where we had the time to do the planning, the playbooking, and then see the outputs of it. And then we had some organizations who a couple of weeks before, like, Ramadan's happening in 2 weeks, we don't have a plan, let's get that going. So I think to see the two different elements and how, the execution of it took place during that time, the quality of both sides.
So the planning is key.
Planning is definitely key, yes.
And I shouldn't call you in the middle of Ramadan and say, hey, man, I got a phone call. Jumana's laughing. Jumana, inshallah, I won't do it to you this year. So I shouldn't call you, man, in the middle of Ramadan and say, we've got to deploy a campaign for this organization that's struggling and that's getting started. Okay, I'm going to try my best not to do that, inshallah, this year. But that's why we're doing this show. So what are some prep? What are some prep? Some planning and playbooking. You said planning and playbooking. What are some top line things you think they should be doing this year ahead of Ramadan?
First step is when we're talking about the donor engagement side is you don't want to start just engaging with them during Ramadan. So what does that pre-cultivation outreach look like? So there definitely needs to be a plan for donors alone pre-Ramadan. So before the solicitation moments happen. And that can be, online and offline, depending on their giving level. So really building that individualized plan for our base donors, our mid donors, and then for sure our major donors. And it doesn't start on day one of Ramadan. It has to start a couple months before. If we're thinking about technology and tools that really power, every strategy's deployment is ensuring your CRM is prepped. Do the donor cleanup lists a month before. Make sure there's no duplicates. Update the contact info. If we have emails, perhaps in other third-party tools for past events, for the other online campaigns that may have taken place throughout the year. Ensuring your segmentation is ready. These are very easy routines that can be set and installed before Ramadan takes place. Making sure your landing pages are tested, the buttons are working well, the language is updated for Ramadan, your tracking is installed. So we're able to do those daily reporting and ensure our dashboards are showing us all of the real-time information on what we're raising day per day. Building those dashboards is also an important piece. How are you monitoring on a daily basis if your campaigns are performing well or need to be updated? Make sure you have a comms calendar in place. The ideal is most of your comms should be pretty much built out before Ramadan even starts and scheduled so that during Ramadan, you're mainly monitoring and enhancing performance and you're putting your team's capacity in those areas rather than doing the build and the deployment during the most important time of year.
Thank you. I mean, Jumana, as Mon speaking to sort of prep, plan, and preparing and data segmentation, take our audience to the theming and the content. Like I've been in these Ramadan sessions where no one's talking about what Mon's talking about, where there's just this over attention on theme and design. I get it. That's important. But this inattention to really the stuff that matters. I mean, I know I just asked 2 questions, but if you can weigh in on content, theme, Ramadan theme, does it matter? And then what does some of that plan and prep on the digital side look like?
Yeah, absolutely. And, one of the things that we frequently talk about is how many Muslim charities there are in the network that are all fighting for the same dollars. So sharing your story, sharing your, impactful work is the most important thing that you can do in this month. And again, showcasing what you can bring to the community is how you will bring attention to your programs in this month. Ramadan is the time of giving. We all want to find the charity that we believe is going to do the most with our dollars. And being able to emulate that in your comms, in your communications is basically the most important thing for any charity to do. I know Monica was very strong about, making sure your operational aspect of things are in order, but this coincides with making sure that you have the stories told about your programs. Storytelling is the most valuable thing that you can do to share your programs and show how impactful they are. And building out, your theme in advance, being able to build your copy to share these stories in advance is how you're going to be effective in the month of Ramadan. I've seen so many charities over my years be able to raise millions of dollars that they weren't anticipating just because they used the opportunity in that month to share their best stories.
Yeah. And then what do you think, like how important is just that theme? Like, and then second, I would say when what are some tips that you have on the stories, especially nowadays with AI? How do you pick the right theme? How do you tell the story in the best way in a world where is even more filled with skeptic people, thinking it's all out of AI anyway?
When it comes to picking the best theme, I think the best thing to do is put yourself in the perspective of the donor. If I was looking at this charity and I'm considering if I want to contribute or not and how much I want to contribute, what's it going to be that's going to get me and push me to make that larger donation or to make that donation in general? So picking the theme throughout the month that is going to coincide with, what your donors are feeling in this month is, again, one of the most valuable things that you can do as a charity when preparing for the month of Ramadan. And going back to transparency and how AI has made such an implication in the industry these days, I've seen AI be useful in positive ways and, of course, in negative ways throughout social media and things like that. But showcasing your programs and individuals and sharing their stories can help, erase that fear and misunderstanding from your donors that there might be, some, images that are not accurate or are not ground material and things like that. So being the most transparent that you can with your recipients, showing their stories and how these donations can change their lives really truly helps people get away from this idea that, there might not be these programs actually happening and where are my dollars going. So by sharing these individual stories, you can reduce people's, fear to give and contribute to your programs.
Mon, you talked about something super important that I want to go back to, if you have to build when you need to execute, the consequence on performance. You and I have seen this for 5 years now that, having to build while needing to execute reduces the quality of the execution. And so you highlighted it. You said, hey, make sure you build before Ramadan. What are some of those things that they need to build before Ramadan? Like if you were to just list out some of the things that have to be off a checklist, for example.
Yeah, no, for sure. First and foremost, when we're thinking of the elements of the campaign, you want to think of your donors first. So identify and build out portfolios for your mid donors and your major gift donors. So you should have portfolios set. You should have folks on your team that know they're assigned to those different levels of donors and have those ready. When you're thinking about, outreach plans, are we gonna have events take place or community events take place at Masjid? So identify and start outreach to secure those community events. If there's a checklist also for campaigning, you want a landing page. And is it a single landing page you're driving folks to, or is it built per segment? If it's a lapsed donor, if it's a donor who hasn't given for a multiple amount of years that we're trying to reactivate. Build your dashboard. You should have a daily dashboard where you see how much funding came in, the year prior or even the year before that one, and then the current year to ensure that, you're obviously raising more than the previous based on your set objectives and goals for that year.
I remember, last year, for example, and just to take everyone behind the scenes, Mon mentioned build so that when you're executing, you've got your eye on the dashboard. And something we talk about at Intuitive is, to be able to improve execution, you have to be able to troubleshoot execution. And you can't troubleshoot execution if you don't have line of sight to the right KPIs. You know, you hear this all the time. I go to board meetings all the time, like KPIs and reports and outcomes and results. All that really is about having the right, KPIs on the right levers. Kind of like I always say this in my classrooms, like think about the cockpit of a plane, the pilot sitting there and he's got multiple screens and he's got switches all around him or her. And so when he's in flight, before he takes off or she takes off, they have a flight plan and everything's built out, and then they take off. And then when things need adjustment, he or she is watching the dashboard to see where's the weather, where's the storm, where's the jet stream. And they're troubleshooting by using all the different levers and buttons. Similarly, Ramadan's like that. When Mon is saying and Jumana are saying you got to have the right dashboards, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about build your plane before Ramadan, set up your flight plan, have your switches in front of you and your dashboards in front of you, and be prepared to troubleshoot. Last year, if I take you behind the scenes, we had about 30 campaigns going all at once, 30 individual Muslim nonprofit Ramadan campaigns going, and we had 30 different team members running these different campaigns. And as we're watching dashboards on the night of the 27th, which is the night when people give the most, we're up all night. The whole team's up all night and we're on Zoom and we're watching the dashboard. And we use Fundraise Up. And we'll do a whole nother show on technology. But me personally, I don't want to do another fundraising campaign unless I have Fundraise Up. And the reason why is because Fundraise Up gives me the ability to monitor, outreach and communications at the granular level. I can literally send an email, send an SMS, launch an ad, make a phone call to a donor, and I can track at the granular level whether they saw the link, whether they clicked the link, whether they donated the link. And now imagine on the 27th of Ramadan, we're all watching and we're monitoring the donations and we're monitoring the clicks in real time. And we're troubleshooting the messaging, we're troubleshooting the graphics, we're troubleshooting the stories, as Jumana said, in real time, and working to ensure that we achieve 27th night goals. That's the surgical level management that Monica and Jumana are talking about that you can do if you build in advance. Tell me, Jumana, let's say January this year, people are probably focused on tax receipts. And then February, Ramadan starts. So if we're talking about by when should folks have theme and comms and all that built out? And what are some of those things they should have built out?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd love to hear every charity working in a preparatory position. I think at least 45 to 60 days in advance allows for you as the organization to communicate with your ground teams to get the program, content that you need, or whether it's a local program, getting what you need in order to prep for the month of Ramadan so that you have the storyline and the theme created in advance. You have the content, you can film if you need something, you can photograph if you need something, getting all these pieces together within at least 45 to 60 days. So when the hiccups come, because we know in the nonprofit world, there's always a hiccup somehow, some way, you are prepared and you can get ahead of those things. Specifically the comms, when it comes to Ramadan, it's very hard. You have a lot of brain fog. So making sure that stuff is prepared in advance will be the best solution for most nonprofits these days. And I understand that not everyone can prep that far in advance, but giving yourself that time to leave the door open for any changes. In previous years, we've had emergency campaigns pop up the day before Ramadan starts. So you need to be able to have that window that allows you to make changes and not scrambling in the last minute to adjust for these things.
Mon, question. Mailer in Ramadan or no mailer? Do you do it next year or you don't like to do mailers?
That's always a question that comes up, even I would say for end of years and different periods of time. I think, the mailers should be part of your toolkit. If you haven't done it before, you need to try to see what the outcomes are. However, if previous mailers haven't worked, that generally means your donor base doesn't respond well to those type of offline channels. If you are doing a mailer though, I always suggest you have to have that BRE, like the business return envelope piece, because you're wanting to make it easy for the donor. So a lot of the times people are sending mailers, but they're not making it in such a way that it's easy for the donor to just return a check or fulfill their donation. So there's different ways to look at it.
Yeah, I like mailers. I definitely like mailers. At least the research says 25 cents to renew $1 through a mailer. And then it costs $1.25 to raise $1 to a new audience. So what that means, and piggybacking off of Mon's thought here, is if your donors do respond well, do it. Here's the science that's going to help you make that decision. And one thing that we always do is deploy a mailer to a Libunt segment last year, but not this year. It's a great way to renew your donors. Your Zakat appeal. We didn't even talk about Zakat yet for Ramadan. And then, but for your new donor lists, we rarely do it. Mon, do we do it for new donor lists? I don't think we really do it for new donor lists anymore.
No.
Hasn't worked for us. Like buying a list and doing a mailer to just a nationwide list. I remember one of our first failures actually in 2020. We had a startup nonprofit, and this was before everyone was really doing some serious ad work. We went and bought a list and did a mailer, and nothing came back from it. I think that was one of our first lessons from a failure. And if you're watching this show and what nonprofit you're from the bottom of our heart, I'm really, really sorry about that. And we're living that lesson and have applied that to all the nonprofits who came later. Jazakallah khair for helping us learn that and teach that forward. But for the renewal campaigns, for sure, we're going to do a mailer. Yeah. How about, Zakat? We didn't talk about Zakat yet. So, how do you mix your Zakat message with your regular organization mission? Like, what advice do you have for folks out there? I don't know, Mon or Jumana, if you want to take that.
I can start us off. For Zakat messaging, we try to include it in all of the online and offline messaging. It's very important because a lot of the times, even organizations' website doesn't indicate if that organization is Zakat eligible. So while everyone is looking to give their Zakat during Ramadan, it's important to educate the folks you're reaching out to that you are Zakat eligible and which programs are. It doesn't have to be loud and center each time. I think there's a separate Zakat campaign you can send, but in every other communication, it's very worth it to add it into a PS, PS, we are Zakat eligible, to ensure that they are educated on their giving as well.
Yeah. And then Jumana, what are your thoughts on, making sure you're really covering the Zakat, the skeptics out there who want to validate? Like, how do you deal with that as you're building out your comms?
I'm trying to think here for a moment.
That's okay. How did you guys do the Zakat piece in the past? You can share that experience. You can edit this part too.
Yeah, time with that. That's why I'm having a hard time answering that. I even had a hard time sharing this with the team, how to handle this.
We can go to another question if you want. It's no big deal.
Because there's just such a stark difference between the conservatives and the liberals on Zakat. I don't really want to answer that. I don't know how to answer that. I'll say
people view Zakat differently, and it's very personal. So, as an organization, recognize that you lead with your ask, and be prepared to answer any question that comes in.
Yeah, I can answer it that way. So the question that you asked was, how do you handle the um, question?
Integrate zakat into your communications. Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things that we do, no, I shouldn't start it off that way. Integrating Zakat into your communications plans is really easy, and you don't have to overkill the concept of Zakat. We all know that it's our duty, and then throughout the year that we're responsible to submit, and most people want to do this in Ramadan. So putting small things like badges and banners on your social media graphics, as Monica mentioned, putting like short PSs in your statements, it can be overbearing when everyone's, trying to make sure that people are recognizing that their campaigns are Zakat eligible. But as a charity, making sure that the programs that you're selecting and highlighting as Zakat eligible, it's really complicated to, make sure that you are showcasing how these programs are Zakat eligible. As we know, there's quite a few categories that fall within that line, but making sure that you have proper resources from local scholars or imams, or if there's a fatwa in regards to your charity, giving credible sourcing for why your program is Zakat eligible is huge. That was one of the things that we saw come up frequently. And people are very sensitive on what they give their zakat to, because they want to make sure that they're properly giving their zakat in the way that they should be. So being resourceful to your donors and having that open communication of why you believe that these programs are zakat eligible is super important.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I would 100% agree. Just, no matter what, just be super transparent and don't get defensive when the questions come in. Thank you for sharing that. I want to cover one more topic. It's the Masjid piece. Since I've been doing Muslim nonprofit growth work for full time now for about 6-7 years. Forgive me, guys, but I'm just going to say it. But the organizations are bananas about masjids and khutbahs and Taraweeh fundraising. Like boards and staff and executive directors are just bananas. Let's go get a khutbah, get a table. And, from a perception standpoint, it looks like, okay, that's where the market is. So let's get in front of them and make an ask. But it turns out, like, I find at least, if you do what Monica and Jumana are saying, which is plan in advance, build your strong comms out in advance, and then be intentional about the right masjids where your audience are, and invest in those relationships, the returns are much bigger and much greater. And I don't know about you, Mon, if you want to weigh in on this or not, but I find like the masjids are starting to charge for sure. The organizations with the deeper pockets are getting creative with how they lock in their relationship, even covering imam salaries. So if I'm on the board of a masjid, and there's an organization that says, we're going to cover your imam's salary, just give us 5 or 6 khutbahs a year, likely that board's going to say, yeah. So it's a very, very interesting space. On the other hand, you're talking about massive logistics for QR codes, tabling, prints, and everything else. And you might raise 10,000, you might raise 20,000. You might get 150, but it's pledges and contact data you can't follow up on. I don't know, Mon. What do you think? Are the masjids worth it still? Should we go big on masjids in 26? What are your thoughts?
I don't know. Why don't you tell me? Last year you were in an RV for 30 days, then you did a 30-day sprint visiting masjids for one of our mission partners. So how did that turn out?
She threw it back on me. Okay, yeah. So yes, we did do a grassroots tour. So last year, Intuitive, we've got a 40-foot motorhome. And last year we spent 30 days in the DMV area for a Muslim nonprofit. And we went masjid to masjid almost every night. And I still, in my mind, I'm like, was it worth it? Because I don't have exact data. And that's kind of where I'm having to rationalize this to say, yes, it was worth it, because we don't have exact data. Now you set it all up, like Iman, and you helped me build all this out. I mean, we had the QR codes, we had the sign up forms, we had the sheets, We had the paperwork. We had the volunteers at every single masjid, every single tarawih, every single community event. I mean, we were at the all-night halal fest things, if suhoor fests and iftar fests. We were at all of them for 30 days, DMV area, and really just couldn't get people to scan the QR or sign up. The only thing that we have as a North Star is the growth in total donations in that geographic area, which our CRM lets us do. So if I were to say it made a difference, I'll say yes, it added new contacts and new donors to the database. If I were to say, was it absolutely worth it? Then I'm stuck, because the opportunity cost of the spend on doing an ad campaign, might have given the same growth, the same results. So I'm torn there. I would just say, if you're an organization that needs a human touch, and I think transparency is king and queen now, and human experience is king and queen now. And so if that's true, then yes, invest in community engagement, but don't expect it to have a direct ROI right away. Expect it as sort of long game, in building trust, in building truth to your brand, in building a human experience with your mission, and growing in a long-term investment and base building. Those are my thoughts, Ma. I don't know if you agree, disagree. You want to throw it back at me, please let me know.
No, I agree with what you shared. It is a lot of work, so you do have to plan it accordingly, make sure you have the right human resources, and it is very relational. So not just anyone can start that type of outreach and secure those relationships and commitments. And yes, it does infuse cash into the organization, but it's primarily a one-time cash infusion. There's not a very sustainable approach in being able to renew those dollars or steward those dollars. So it really depends on what your strategic plan calls for. Are you trying to infuse those one-time investments, or do you want to spend more of your time, deploying sustainable approaches where you are getting that donor data, and then you are able to take them to that next level with the organization?
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, because I mean, that's the intuitive way. Our bias is we're not chasing the cash. Our bias is we're trying to build sustainability. And for those of you who are listening out there, we want to do an activity where, okay, maybe it's a khutbah, maybe it's a tabling, maybe it's, a presentation, maybe it's a webinar. And that's the logistics in the event. But then Jumana's team comes in, and it's about now stewarding those contacts, converting those subscribers to supporters, taking them on a journey so that we're doing a horizontal introduction to organizational programs that we want them to support, and we're doing a vertical introduction to get them to upgrade and dig deeper into furthering the mission. Because that's moving from a transactional relationship to a transformational relationship, which is how you go from fundraising to development and sustainability. And you've got to have those right tools to do that. And I think we can talk about that in another show, not today. Any sort of last remarks on Ramadan? I'll go to Jumana and then Mon to you. Jumana, any last tips, advice, guidance you have for our audience regarding Ramadan 26? It's coming right around the corner. Any thoughts, any advice, any guidance?
Ramadan 2026. It's coming, as you mentioned, Dr. Tayyab, it's coming a lot sooner than we imagined. February is right around the corner. So that 45 to 60 days is nearing pretty soon. So it is best, as I mentioned, to get ahead of the game. But looking into Ramadan 2026 in a new perspective, we mentioned how, visiting the Masjid might not be the most ideal model. So trying to find a way that sustainability is your focus for Ramadan 2026 so trying to find Ramadan 2026 using a different model this year. If you've consistently depended on visiting Masjid and using your personal interactions, try building out your social media, try building out your communication plan, see how this can affect your organization differently this year.
Thank you. Iman, any advice and tips and guidance that you have not shared already? Like how can folks make sure that they have a super effective Ramadan this year?
Yeah, I think there is one thing I'd like to share. We spoke a lot about how we're engaging with our donors and our current contacts, but what's important is to also ensure there's, a way that you're getting a hold of new individuals and contacts, which is really that primary reason a lot of the community efforts take place. But what are those functions or activities that are being deployed? An example, and this worked really well in organizations we've done this in the past, in order to get new contacts, is like, what are those Ramadan toolkits you're sharing out with the communities through your social media, through your emails, through your online ads. But sometimes there were toolkits like duas or reflections, impact guides, a daily what to do during Ramadan for kids, or coloring pages for the children. So, how are you putting some toolkits out there in order to give value out to those individuals? And then at the same time, you're getting new contacts for your organizations to cultivate and steward into the future.
Thank you. I'm going to try a freestyle playbook, and then Jumana, you guys beat me up or tell me where I've got a gap. So for our listeners out there, here's my algorithm when I start building out a Ramadan plan. First thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to look at my 2026 annual goal. And if you're watching this show right now, then you want to lean in on your board to get that if they don't already have it. You should have a 2026 annual fund goal already. And just to keep a nice round number, let's say it's 1 million, Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to look back at last year's Ramadan. And I'm going to say, what did we do last year in Ramadan? Let's just say it was 500,000. Now, based on last year's goal in proportion to last year's annual fund goal, I'm going to benchmark that as, okay, if I did everything exactly the same, this is what my expectation is. Now, if you're going to nerd out, like which I do, I actually run those numbers back into something called a compound annual growth rate. And with ChatGPT, you can get your help on getting that. The compound annual growth rate is a formula to test your hypothesis, to validate whether it's a realistic goal or not. So now that let's just assume I validated it, and this is a realistic goal. And this is just basically saying, if I did everything the same, all conditions fair and equal, then this is what my expectation should be. Now, what we do at Intuitive Solutions is we usually set that as our base goal. We don't call anything a worst case scenario. We call it a base goal. But then we plan the best goal. Best goal is, what is that bigger number that we want to target? And let's say in this case, I did some homework and I said, we're going to target 750,000, for example. Now that 750,000, the next step in this process, now that I have a goal, is to build a gift range chart. Gift range chart too with ChatGPT. You can Google it. The gift range chart is a mathematical format to help you see, from how many donors do you need at what giving level to achieve the goal that you want in the most efficient way. In the words of my professor and teacher, Dr. Sadiq Siddiqui, the gift range chart helps you get to your goal in the most efficient way. The alternative to a gift range chart is you're just asking everyone to give whatever they can. That works sometimes, but it's not the most efficient way. The gift range chart solves for this. Ask everybody, ask as many people as you can, and you'll get to your goal. Now, in the gift range chart, the way I structure mine is by key strategies based on giving level. So Monica on the show earlier, she said, set up your portfolios. Now, on the gift range chart at the top are my major and mid donor levels. Monica mentioned that. So the major donor levels and the mid donor levels, I'll have the exact number of donors I need at, let's say, 50,000. The exact number of donors I need at, let's say, 25,000. The exact donors I need at, let's say, 5,000. So now, and within those numbers I have my mids and my majors. I'm going to take that and go back to my database now, and I'm going to find what I call prospects. Prospects these are prospective donors based on historical giving. If you took one of my classes, you learned about RFM, recency, frequency, monetary analysis. The RFM analysis tells me the higher probability that someone's going to give at a future giving level. Now, based on this, Monica said earlier in the show, set up your portfolios. From here, now we actually set up the portfolios. Now, I now have a total number of donors at a giving level between, let's say, 50,000 and 5,000. Now, Monica also said in this show, Monica also said in this show that you take your portfolios and you assign them to your team. Let's talk about team for a minute. Now, team means human resources, meaning you need to resource that strategy. Key strategy 1, major and mid donor outreach, operationalized through portfolios, assigned to human resources. Now, let's say you're a small nonprofit and it's just you and all you have is a board. So your choice is major gifts. I need to then assign those to my board, or I need to create a volunteer group I'm going to assign them to. If you have a major gifts officer, you can assign some to your major gifts officer. If you have human resources in the organization, you can distribute this portfolio to them. Your major and mid donor outreach is your highest probability of achieving at least 50 to 60% of your goal. And you can chat GPT that. It's called the annual fund profile. The annual fund profile tells us that 60% of your funds comes from 10% of your donors, and 20% comes from 20% of your donors. And the balance is 70%, 20%. You can look up the annual fund profile. I'm going to assign these to my board members or my volunteers. People tell me all the time, Brother Tayyab, we can't get our board to do anything. That's a whole nother conversation, and maybe we should have another show on it. Don't waste time beating on the wall unless you want to show them a story of their own failure. That's change management, whole nother show. Today, we're talking about execution. Today, we're talking about Ramadan. Today, we're talking about making sure your Ramadan execution is successful. Don't wait too long on an unsupportive board member. Don't wait too long on an unsupportive volunteer or staffer who's not going to do the job. Swap them out. Hire fast, fire fast. Onboard fast, offboard fast if it's not working out. Have the honest conversations. Set up expectations. That's a whole nother conversation about making sure you have successful people on your team. But this major mid-donor outreach, don't take your eye off the ball. I work with too many organizations. They focus so much on the Masjids. They focus so much on the emails. They focus so much on the SMSs that they miss 60% of the opportunity. That's the value of the major mid-level work. Now, next, I'm going to go down to all the base building. The base building tactics are everybody else, and that's where I'm going to build my comms plan. I'm going to set up my landing pages. I'm going to set up my emails. I'm going to set up my comms plan. I'm going to set up my Zakat messaging. I'm going to set up my theme. I'm going to set up my emails. I'm going to set up my videos. And for me, I don't need anything Hollywood grade. The donors are not expecting the organizations to hire Hollywood producers to produce art and video. Unless you're a nonprofit that is a museum and a film studio, then you need to show your execution. But if you're in the relief space, if you're in the education space, if you're in the youth space, the women's empowerment space, in food security, any of it, your donor does not expect you to spend millions of bucks on Hollywood grade stuff. Go out, use your iPhone camera, take a video, and my kids, 12, 13, 14, are using CapCut. It's an app, and they're giving me stuff that blows me away. Use simple stuff. You don't have to use this AI stuff. Use it to help, but don't use AI fake videos. Don't use AI fake pictures. Use real stuff to tell real stories. If your nonprofit is in a space where you have sensitive situations, then say it in your video. say it in your video. You know how you watch those documentaries and it says reenactment? So if you're going to make a video and your organization is, let's say, in domestic violence, and you're capturing a story or telling a story about someone, then yes, use AI, use fake videos, but state it. This is a reenactment to protect the identity of our beneficiaries. Thank you for your support. And have that disclaimer on the video before it goes out. Now, I've got all my emails, I've got all my ads, I've got all my comms set up, I've got my SMS set up, I've got my landing page set up, I've got my human resource team stacked with portfolios and with tools that they can send out. I'm now focused on empowerment, from building to empowerment, then into execution. And in Ramadan, you want to make sure that you've got strong dashboards. Back to what Mon said, strong dashboards to troubleshoot. Every single tactic should have a unique tracker. And if you can't do that, you need to make sure you solve for that problem. Otherwise, you're in an inshallah space. Alhamdulillah, we did it. Let's see what happens. Great, no problem. But the Prophet ﷺ said, tie your camel first. And that means all knowledge is from Allah, which means all tools are from Allah, which means you have a responsibility to use the best tools. You have a responsibility to use the best tools in the best time of the year to invite people to give. And then lastly, back to what Jumana was saying, is tell the best stories and be real with your stories. Within all of this, don't overthink it. Don't try to be super fancy. Just tell it straight, tell it how it is, and be honest and be sincere. This type of storytelling, just very real stuff, no fluffy Hollywood grade stuff, just real stuff we've seen in the last 5 years in the nearly billions of dollars that we've raised across our nonprofits makes the best difference. Brothers and sisters, thank you so much for being on the show today. Thank you for listening in. Thank you, Mon, and thank you, Jumana, for being here today. We'll have more opportunities to share about how we do Ramadan, because we want your Ramadan to be super, 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 super successful. Intuitive Solutions, an organization on a mission to make the world a better place. We're dreaming of a world where everyone is engaged in their philanthropy, and collectively we're all making it better. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.